Expectations.
We're good.
We're good.
Ba-ba-da-da!
Bring it on.
We're back.
And now, a podcast.
I love podcasts.
So, we are doing that was a great show. Just enjoyed. We're all sweaty here at the park. Those of you listening on the podcast, welcome. We had a good time here with Danger Boat Improv at Minnehaha Falls. The Art of Togethering series, we're exploring how are we together. So how did it go for you two?
Oh, it was great.
I'm here with Brandon, by the way.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Tane Danger. No, this was great. I love this. We talked a little before we did this. I am a really big believer in the value of spaces and communities that bring people together that are not work and are not school, and being able to do that in a way where you have fun. Like that's my jam. That's what I'm all about. And so this was a beautiful, wonderful opportunity to do that and share a little bit of improv stuff as part of it.
Yeah, but I was talking to somebody the other day about stuff like this, and what we do are kind of interactive metaphors, where using improv as kind of a tool, it gets to deeper kind of things, and people make those aha connections, and it's almost like magic, as people are kind of coming to realizations and seeing all that in real time. It's great. I can't get enough of it.
So, why don't you tell us about what you've done together? So you do something called Theater Public Policy.
We do. So about 10, 12 years ago, we started a show called the Theater of Public Policy to get people excited about big ideas. So every show features a conversation with a smart person who might be a scientist or a mayor or some sort of do-gooder. And we talk to them about their area of expertise and their job, and then a team of improvisers is out to the side listening. And they then take the stage and they bring to life the entire conversation through unscripted comedy. So they're taking all the little points and details of the issue and turning it into just this big, wild, fun thing that happens in front of an
Can you give
audience.
us an example of one that you remember well?
Oh, on the spot.
Well, we've just done a few of them. I mean, we did a show just a couple of weeks ago about a big project here in the Twin Cities called Reconnect Rondo. And that is a proposal. There's a little backstory here, but there's the Rondo neighborhood, largely in St. Paul, historically African-American neighborhood that was decimated by I-94 coming through it and kind of ripping that community apart. So now there's a proposal to build a land bridge over for both to physically actually create space to reconnect that community and, again, metaphorically or spiritually in a whole batch of ways, help reconnect sort of that community and give a space for that to happen. So we interviewed the executive director of this organization, and it's obviously like a heavy, serious topic in some ways, but then you bring in the improv folks who are using all of that as sort of their jumping off point to bring different aspects of both that idea and that piece like to life, as well as to like poke at it and prod at it. And so, there were scenes that we did, that the improvisers did, just of sort of the, you can imagine sort of the funniness of the room where people are like, all right, how are we going to fix this? Like, what do we do? Like, well, what if we build like just a really big bridge? And like, how does that work? No, it has to be a really big bridge, and like sort of yeah, exactly. But and then like just kind of spinning it out to imagine like this huge thing, and then people in the same scene being like, wait a second, like what if that bridge is so big? What happens to like all the stuff that's already there? And you can kind of like create characters and almost like a sense of whimsy, but that is talking about full of sugar kind of way to talk about real substantive, challenging things.
Well, yeah, because you're probably getting at all these different angles of a opportunity, a problem, like all the challenges from all these different characters' perspectives.
Right. Yeah, sometimes.
You don't get to do very often in public discourse.
Like in typical meetings about this sort of stuff, people come ready for a fight. They're there because they want to say their say. They're not ready to listen, or they're at each other's throats over a problem. But we find that comedy is this disarming effect. It's hard to be angry or scared when you're laughing, and so we want to be different from all the other ways we can interact about policy in these
That's good.
So we want to do it in a way where we can all share a laugh together.
I love that. So I'm curious how, like, a little bit of your backstory. When did you get the bug? When did you like feel like improv? That's my jam. That's something I want to do. I want to change the world with this, or I just enjoy it, or what? How did it start for whoever wants to go first?
Well, I started in middle school, but it was just kind of a fun, like, hey, this is something fun to do as part of a theater sort of thing. It never kind of was like, yeah, this is going to be my career. I'm going to make hundreds of dollars doing this. No, but I actually joined up with Tane in college. I tried out for his improv troupe that he founded, and he said no. But then I came back the next year, and he said yes.
Brandon loves
There's a
telling
story.
that story.
It's a good story.
Yeah, that's true. I founded an improv troupe at the college Brandon and I both went to, Gustavus Adolphus College. Like, one of the proudest things of my whole life is that improv troupe still exists. And Brandon and I started doing improv together there. So then, post-college, Brandon and I were both working at different nonprofits. I worked for a period of time at, like, the state of Minnesota. And I think we both sort of had this notion that there's a lot of people working in spaces that do really good work, like in nonprofits, in government, in even in private sector in certain spaces and whatnot, and they do it, but they aren't always good at telling their story, right? Like, or making it fun, right? There's a lot of times, I would say, for especially a lot of times, my friends who like work in nonprofits, where it's like, hey, everybody, you really got to care about this thing because, like, otherwise it's all going to be terrible and we're going to die. Like, and that's sort of like...
And then you hear about 6 other things
yeah,
that day.
Exactly. And it's like, that may be true, but I'm always like, who wants to hang out with that person at the party, right? Like, who wants to go and spend extra time with the person who's like, everything is really terrible, please come volunteer with us. Like,
I can tell you from personal experience, it's a good conversation killer.
Yeah, exactly. So Brandon and I had done improv a lot together, and it was like, improvisers are good at telling a story and making something fun. And so is there a way to bring those two things together and use improv to bring to life some of these issues that feel really hard or challenging, but do it in a way that has a sense of levity or joy or optimism to it? And what's funny about this is we kind of shopped the idea around for a little while before we actually did it on stage. And we talked to 2 different groups of people. We talked to people in the comedy and improv world, and we talked to people in the sort of public dialogue, public space world. And all the people that we talked to in the sort of civic engagement, public discourse space, they were all like, well, if it's so fun, is anybody really learning anything? Like,
Does it count?
Does it? I mean, it seems like it would be kind of trivial, and there was this sort of like dismissiveness about it. And then all the people that we talked to in the comedy world were like, improv comedy about policy sounds boring.
Who would want to see that?
Who would want to go to that? So kind of both sides thought that it would not work for opposite reasons. And then we were like, well, let's just do it anyway. And it turned out it actually, we think, works pretty okay.
Well, it's a unique space, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. It is. And this is...
We are the best public policy improv group and the only one in the state.
The best and the worst.
Yeah, well...
100%.
I don't frame it that way.
But it totally... Several years ago, like 5-6 years ago now, we took the show out to Washington, D.C. for like a run of shows. And we had like these sellout shows in DC, which you can imagine is a town that really appreciates like public policy conversations.
Yeah.
And they were like, I would have people come up to me, they'd be like, this is amazing. There's nothing like this that we've ever had here or anywhere else. And I was sort of like, why? Like, I don't know. Like, we made it happen in Minneapolis. Like, you all should seemingly be able to make it happen in DC, but it is kind of a unique thing. There haven't been a lot of other examples of doing something quite like it.
So what makes it hard?
Ha! How long do we have?
What's a hard thing? Like a hard thing that comes to your mind, like fresh?
I mean, convincing guests to come be part of it. You know, people are scared about the spontaneity. You know, they want a script. They want to know what we are going to say and will be, you know, said to them. They don't like the idea that anything could happen. I mean, I don't think we've ever had a guest on the show that's had a negative experience.
No,
Anyone
Once
who's
they do it,
participated.
once they get there.
It's always, but we do get early on, and we got a lot of like, oh, thank goodness, I had no idea what was going to happen. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
But like, thank you for taking a chance, I guess.
Yeah. There's definitely, that's a piece of it. I mean, frankly, we said like it's a lot easier. Brandon, you mentioned it's hard to be scared and laugh at the same time. Like there are things where like, as good or talented as we are, we can't get people over that. Like they are so upset or angry or scared or despondent about whatever it is that we're talking about. There is nothing to do to sort of like get them to a place where we can sort of open that up and have more of a conversation about it. And I'm not dismissing that. Like there are things like that that are totally understandable why it has that much sort of heft and weight and challenge to it. And that's real, and I don't sort of dismiss that. So there are issues and topics and things like that. I mean, that said, I do think we have done over the years a lot of things people would say, like, you can't do a show about that. Like, that just absolutely will not work. Like, and we've done it, and we did a show, this is going back again several years, but we did a show with the then Minneapolis chief of police. And there were people in the audience who were part of the organizing bodies saying like, we don't need police and we need to get rid of them. And both groups of them were like, at the end, we're really happy that you did this. It was really good to actually be able to engage and have both sides be able to talk about this thing. Like, so I will say
we fixed it.
That
no
was
more problems after that show.
Yeah, I was about to say that was several years ago. We haven't done that topic and show in a few years, and it probably has gotten a lot harder. But I do think that like there are examples of things like that where people think like you can't talk about these things and you can't engage with it. And I generally think that like, it's the principle we talked about in this thing. You kind of have to start with a yes, this is possible, and how can we do it?
Mm-hmm. So you're not ignoring the stuff that people are bringing.
Yeah.
The real life experience, the real crap that's happened.
Yeah.
You talk about getting people excited about hard, thinky stuff. Does that still fit your mission? Good description.
Yeah.
Hard, thinky stuff, and getting people excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite shows are, what you might describe as boring. Let's talk about land zoning, or let's talk about whether we should have a bond versus a levy. Like, all of that stuff is like the mechanical underpinnings of our whole society. All those little things, and people don't know enough about them or get excited about them. And so
it's kind of important in democracy.
They're all super important, but people are dismissive or like, oh, that's not for me. And so I want to bring people into those spaces and show them like, hey, this is a hard thinky thing, but you can engage with it. Do it on your own terms. Don't sit back and think like, oh, that one meeting downtown is the only way to engage with this. Like, no, there are other ways too.
Well, we're learning all the time to move well away from those conversations, right? Because we're either going to be shut down. Well, yeah, we're going to be yes, butted, or no.
And this is something I think about a lot, and I don't have the perfect answer to it, but it's one of the things I try and get us to like lean into. And I think that this space that you created hopefully is a space that's good for this, for folks of like being able to be in a space and have those challenging conversations or talk about stuff that's real and that's hard, and not feel like I need to win. Like, I have to, like, beat the other person at it. Or, like, I need to just sort of, like, agree with them to make this stop, like, to end it or whatnot. There is an art to being able to say, well, you and I disagree about this. Like, and I've heard you, and I understand where you're coming from, and it is different than where I'm coming from. And to some degree, that's okay. Like, that's how we have to be in order to be in community with each other. And that's like a hard skill, and I've wondered out loud whether it's harder in a place like the Midwest here, where we kind of have a culture a lot of times of, well, that's unpleasant, so let's just not talk about it at all, and like, how about them twins, like instead.
Staying up here on the surface.
Yeah, and again, I want to be able to talk to people and hear what they have to say and where they're coming from, and not have it be, well, they either need to convince me that they're 100% right, or I need to convince them that I'm 100% right, and we can actually just sort of be like, that's interesting, that is, yeah, I didn't think about it that way, I'm not sure I agree, but like that's interesting and cool potentially, and that's what, to me, makes the world a beautiful, interesting place. How boring of a world would it be if everybody thought the same thing at all the same time?
Clearly, it's not set up that way. Like,
No.
the universe is not set up
Yeah.
as a mono anything, right?
No, yeah.
Like, look at this park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other piece about this that I would say, in terms of our show and in terms of the themes that you all are talking about, is people are way more complicated than I think we give them credit for, right? Like, we sort of just shorthand so many things as like, oh, this group of people, like, we're here, like, in the park in South Minneapolis, and so probably everybody, like, already
Agrees,
thinks this or,
yeah.
like, is like this, and I'm like, oh, no, talk to people. Like, people are way more complicated than you think they are and have disparate ideas and opinions and come at things from very different places, but you have to, there is a little bit of, you have to be a little brave to, like, venture into that and be open to listening and asking questions and appreciating that that is true and not feel like attacked by it, I guess, is part of it too.
I mean, we talk about practicing when it's easy here. Like, practicing this important stuff when it's easy. And there's so much to practice. And so we just keep coming back, you know. We keep coming back on Sundays, we keep coming back. Charles talked about his group. And that's actually one of the things that we found. People think, you know, well, I just want to be in a group with people like me. I'm like, okay. And then, you know, they do that, and then they realize, oh, we're actually kind of different. Like, I thought we were all the same, and we're actually really different. And then other groups think, I'll just join. I want the most eclectic group possible, you know, that we have, like, nothing in common. And then they realize how much they have in common, right? It goes both ways when we actually show up and, you know, listen around the circle and be present and all the things we practice today, really. So... so much good stuff to talk about. For us, like, what if your job with theater public policy, if that's to get people excited about hard thinky stuff, and I think one of our roles is to help people be equipped for those hard thinky conversations, for those hard thinky and just hard interactions with even our own families close to home, right? So I'm wondering, what's something you, as kind of outsiders, but we'd welcome you, obviously. We're all in this together.
That'd be bad if at this point you're like, we were going to welcome you,
Yeah.
and it is withdrawn. Get out.
So, but with your perspective, that's fresher. You know, we're in this all the time. What is something we can learn about togethering through your art, through improv? You've already said so many things, but if there's just something that you're left with, like...
Well, we talked about in the session, I'm saying this as a repeat for the podcast audience, but we talked about that yes and principle being really a key thing. So coming at things from this notion of like yes and, how do I say yes to something and add something unique to it? And both those pieces are really valuable in any kind of interaction. Like, I always tell people, like, yes is actually very easy. Like, you come to me with an idea or a piece of yourself, and I just say, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, that's easy. That's kind of a throwaway. For me to say, and, I'm invested now in whatever it is that you're bringing to me, and I am thinking, I'm engaging with, like, whatever that is and adding something to it. And there's a huge piece of that comes to what I always peg as, I think, the most important skill for improv, and also the most important skill for, frankly, I think, just being a good human, which is listening. I think that listening is absolutely the most important thing about doing what we do, doing what the kind of work that you all are doing here. I can't do a good improv scene if I'm not listening to what my scene partner is offering, not listening to what the source material was, not listening to how the audience is reacting. And that requires a level of, you know, presence and connection to both the other person, but then everything that's going on around you. And that is the one piece I'll just, and I really do emphasize about this, is we kind of sometimes say, well, either you, I mean, they're a good listener, so they've already kind of got that natural neck. And I'm like, no, listening is a skill. It is something to practice. Like, it is a practice of being present and hearing what somebody else is saying. And you can get better at it. And I think that taking time to really sort of engage and listen to what somebody else is saying, and again, trying to do that in a non-judgmental way, in a curious way, is one of the things we really practice as improvisers, and I think is really valuable off stage as well.
And you had us do things with our whole body today, and I think when I used to hear listen, I'd think up here, you know, just my head.
Oh, yeah.
And my ears, and now I'm thinking my eyes, like what is my body language saying
100%.
To someone and to myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's listening to what this other person is saying, what they're not saying, sort of like what the situation is around it, listening to your own self, like how you're showing up. Listening is like this very like multi-layered thing that is, yeah, it's a skill, but it is something absolutely every single person can practice and get better at.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for helping us practice.
No problem.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to
My
add
turn?
to that?
I would say flexibility, that people always get tripped up when they're too rigid, and whether it's their expectations or how something needs to be done. I mean, I always think about my kids right now because they're young, they're new, and so having flexibility with them just helps my day, and it helps them, you know, not giving them my expectations of how you're supposed to put on your shoes or, you know, get your shirt on or whatever it is, and just kind of rolling with what are they giving me, and then responding.
How can I work with that?
Yeah,
Yes,
being
and.
encouraging. And so, you know, scale that up to adults, not to treat them like children per se, but having that same mindset of, you know, I have this expectation from this job, this other person, whatever's going to happen, and what they give me may not be what I expected, but, you know, treating it as the gift that it is, and then yes-anding that and saying, oh, well, thank you for doing it this way, or whatnot.
There's one other piece that is a little tangential to add, but I think about it a lot in like why I was excited to be part of this event today with Fabric, and I think what you all do is so important. So as you mentioned, like we have this theater company that's focused on like hard thinky things, like big things, and that's important. Those big like overarching issues are really important. I more and more believe after doing this for 10 years, there is no replacement, nothing is as important as building these actual connections in community, right? Like you can change all the policies you want in the world, you can rewrite every like law in the books, and yet if you don't have the underpinnings of that, of like a connected community, of people knowing each other and trusting each other and believing in something bigger than themselves, I don't know how much it actually would matter. Like, I really more and more believe this. And so when people are thinking about, like, how do I do good? Like, I really care about this, and I want to do it. Like, Tane and Brandon, like, you run a theater company about policy. Like, what is the policy thing I should focus on? I will have thoughts about that, but I'm like, did you just, like, talk to people, like, in your community about this? Like, have you talked to your family or made engagements about this? Have you listened to people around you about it? Because that work is really where I believe like you have to start and eventually end. Like that has to be like the circle that you operate in first and foremost. And that is wildly important, and so why I think that what you all do here is so good and valuable.
I do too. Man, yeah. We have so many people in our community doing that kind of work in the world, and our hope is to unleash it. So thank you for helping us kind of remember our potential and power as individuals and as a community, and connecting with you.
Yeah.
And thanks.
Yay.
All right.
Yay. All right, good job, everybody. Great work.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. All right, let's burn
Is that
this
what we
place
say
to
in
the ground.
the entertainment